The sky did not announce its arrival. It simply changed. Above Earth's night side, every satellite feed simultaneously fractured into static. Air traffic control systems across continents flickered, synchronized for a single impossible moment, then went dead. Even the deep space telescopes, those that never slept, blinked once and turned away from the stars as if something had forced them to look down. Then came the object, a single alien vessel, but calling it a ship felt like an insult to scale. It wasn't just in orbit, it dominated it. A vast angular silhouette stretching across low Earth space, its surface absorbing starlight rather than reflecting it. No visible engines, no thrusters, no identifiable propulsion signature. It was as if the laws of motion had agreed to accommodate it. On the surface of Earth, people first saw it as a second moon, then as a shadow that refused to move correctly, then as something that made every instinct in the human brain quietly, instinctively scream, wrong. Within seconds, it was visible over every major city. Tokyo paused mid-traffic. London froze under rain-slick streets. New York's skyline reflected something far larger than itself for the first time in history. Even remote villages where electricity was inconsistent saw it, because somehow screens that were not even powered still lit up with its image. And then came the silence, not absence of sound, absence of signal. 73% of global satellite infrastructure went dark in a synchronized failure. Not destroyed, not jammed, dismissed, as if something had reached into Earth's technological nervous system and gently pinched it off like a thread. Panic erupted instantly in military command centers. Radar operators shouted over collapsing systems. Nuclear response protocols auto-triggered and were instantly overridden. Submarine communication arrays went offline without warning. Fighter jets lost satellite coordination mid-flight and were forced into manual control. But in one place, deep beneath the Himalayan mountain range, buried under kilometers of reinforced rock and forgotten treaties, there was no panic, only observation. A vast underground chamber, lit by cold blue holographic displays, hummed with quiet activity. Dozens of figures stood in silence watching the alien vessel's first scan of Earth unfold in real time, and they were smiling, not nervously, not desperately, calmly. One of them, a woman in a plain black uniform with no insignia, stepped forward. The holographic projection above her showed the alien ship broadcasting its first transmission. A structured signal, mathematical, precise, confident. It translated itself instantly into every language on Earth. Unregistered pre-space civilization detected. Submit for assessment, compliance required. Somewhere on the surface, governments would have collapsed at those words alone. But down here in the buried chamber, no one reacted because they had already heard it before. A man standing near the central console exhaled slowly. His voice was quiet, almost tired. Same wording as last time. Another technician responded without looking up from the interface. Different species, same arrogance. The woman didn't take her eyes off the hologram. The alien vessel was now deploying scanning beams across Earth's atmosphere. Thin violet threads of energy sweeping continents like fingers, searching for a pulse, and then something changed. One of the technicians frowned. "Sir, they're not just scanning the surface." The room went still. "They're scanning below crust level." A pause. Then, softly, "That's not standard protocol." The woman finally spoke. "It is for them." Above Earth, the alien vessel adjusted its orbit. Slowly, deliberately, like a predator circling something it assumed could not see it. But beneath that motion, something else responded far below oceans, beneath tectonic plates, under layers of forgotten geology and deeper, older engineering. Systems that had not activated in centuries began to wake, not booting, recognizing. In the alien ship, an alarm chimed for the first time, not loud, not urgent, just uncertain. A subroutine flagged an anomaly in Earth's deep interior. A signal that did not match any known planetary profile. The Karzul commander leaned forward on the bridge, eyes narrowing as data streamed across his interface. "Impossible," he muttered, because Earth's response signature had just changed. It was no longer passive, it was calculating. Back and somewhere beneath the Himalayas, the woman finally allowed herself the smallest smile. "They're early," she said. The technician glanced up. Early for what? The hologram above them flickered, because the alien ship had just stopped scanning. Completely. If it had just realized something was scanning it in. Return. And in that moment of silence between worlds, Earth's buried systems sent their first response, a single classified designation, transmitted upward through layers of rock, ocean, and atmosphere, into the waiting alien vessel. Target confirmed. Inside the Himalayan command center, every screen simultaneously shifted to red. The woman's smile faded, not fear, anticipation, because the protocol had just escalated, and far above them, in orbit, the alien ship began, broadcasting something it had not intended to share yet, a full, fleet-wide distress synchronization pulse, as if it had just seen something in Earth's depths it was never supposed to find. And for the first time since its arrival, the universe around Earth felt smaller. The alien ship didn't come alone, but now it was calling for help. It wasn't sure would answer. The alien transmission did not travel like normal communication. It fractured space as it moved. A pulse of structured energy erupted from the Karjul vessel, rippling outward in concentric waves that bent radio, optical and gravitational sensors alike. Across Earth's orbit, every monitoring station, human and otherwise, registered the same impossible phenomenon. A fleet-wide alert. Not a message, a summoning. Inside the alien ship, the bridge lights dimmed to a deep violet tone. The commander stood motionless as streams of data flooded his neural interface. The initial scan of Earth had been corrupted, entire sections replaced with unreadable symbols that didn't match any known Karjul encoding standard. That alone was impossible. But what disturbed him more was the silence that followed, because Earth did not react to their distress signal. It absorbed it, like a sponge drinking in water. And somewhere in the darkness between Earth and orbit, something answered back, not with words, with structure. Deep beneath the planet's crust, the dormant systems of Earth were no longer dormant. They were assembling. In oceans that had never been fully mapped, metallic formations rose silently from abyssal trenches, not ships, frameworks, skeletons of technology too large to be fully comprehended from any single vantage point. They did not break the surface. They simply aligned beneath it, forming invisible geometric lattices that extended across tectonic boundaries. On land, seismic monitoring stations began to malfunction, not from overload, but from order. Every tremor across the globe was suddenly synchronized into patterns too precise to be natural. The Himalayas, the Andes, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, all vibrating in harmony like a vast instrument being tuned. And still, no one on Earth's surface knew. Only the buried command center watched in controlled silence. Inside the chamber, the woman now stood directly beneath a rotating hologram of Earth. Lines of red light pulsed outward from deep subterranean nodes, converging into a global neural-like structure. One technician whispered, almost reverently, "It's waking up faster than expected." Another shook his head. "No, it's not waking up." A pause. "It's responding." Above Earth, the Karjul commander ordered a demonstration strike, a test, a warning. From the alien vessel's lower bay, a weapon array unfolded, vast crystalline emitters aligning into a single focused aperture. Energy condensed into a narrow beam, shimmering with gravitational distortion. It was not designed for destruction alone, but for erasure. A controlled strike meant to demonstrate superiority without risking total planetary collapse. The beam fired. Space itself bent. A column of pure force descended toward Earth's upper atmosphere, burning through ion layers and electromagnetic shields. It should have hit the surface within seconds, but it didn't. Halfway through descent, the beam stopped, not deflected, not absorbed, held, frozen in mid-space as if an invisible hand had grasped it. Inside the alien bridge, alarms erupted instantly. Tactical officers scrambled as energy readouts spiked beyond safe thresholds. Beam integrity collapsing. Recalibrating, no response. "It's not scattering, it's being contained." The commander stepped forward, eyes locked on the viewport. Outside, the beam hung motionless above Earth like a suspended pillar of light. Around it, faint geometric distortions shimmered. patterns forming in real time like a cage being drawn around a predator mid-leap. Then the impossible happened. The beam began to reverse. Slowly at first. A hesitation. A flicker. Then violently. Energy surged backward along its own path, not returning to the ship, but being rewritten as it traveled. The weapon system screamed under feedback pressure as alien engineers attempted emergency shutdown protocols. But it was too late. On Earth's surface, lightning struck across clear skies without storms. Oceans shimmered under invisible currents. Satellites that had gone dark suddenly flickered back. Online, but their data streams were wrong, rewritten, reformatted. If something had taken control of the meaning of their signals, in the Himalayan command center, the woman finally turned away from the Earth hologram. "Status?" she asked. The technician's hands trembled slightly as he read the incoming data. "They just fired on us." A pause. "And the system is returning it," the woman nodded once. "Good." The technician looked up sharply. "Good?" She stepped closer to the console, watching as the alien energy beam dissolved into Earth's invisible defense lattice like ink into water. "They confirmed they're hostile." Her voice lowered. "That means Phase 2 is authorized." Above them, the alien commander watched as the beam vanished entirely, erased not by destruction, but by reinterpretation. And then the Carzul sensors detected something else. A second anomaly. Beneath Earth's crust, something had just shifted positions, not moving, awakening alignment. And for the first time since arriving in orbit, the alien fleet began to spread, not forward, not downward, but away from Earth's gravitational envelope. Because something beneath the planet had just acknowledged their existence fully, and it was no longer content to be observed. It was preparing to observe back. The alien fleet realizes Earth's surface was never the real threat. It was only the outer shell of something still deciding whether they deserved to exist.
The silence after the failed strike lasted exactly 1.7 seconds. Then the alien ship changed formation. Not outwardly, not visibly, internally. Across the Carzul vessel, thousands of crystalline systems reconfigured themselves at once, like a living organism instinctively tightening its defenses. The commander did not speak immediately. He was reading something no Carzul officer was ever trained to interpret. A hostile environment that did not behave like an environment. Earth was not resisting. It was negotiating physics itself. "Report," he finally ordered. A tactical officer responded, voice strained. "Energy reversal complete. Our beam didn't fail, it was rewritten." "Rewritten?" The officer hesitated. "The return signature does not match our weapon profile anymore. It's been converted into planetary feedback architecture." A pause spread across the bridge. The commander's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The officer swallowed. "It means the planet didn't block our attack. It learned from it." A flicker of discomfort passed through the alien crew. Carzul doctrine had no classification for adaptive planetary intelligence. Worlds were passive. Resources. Battlegrounds. Not participants. But Earth was behaving like neither. Below them, the planet remained visually unchanged. Blue oceans. White clouds. Calm continents. Deceptively peaceful. But beneath that calm, something vast had just begun to move in organized silence. In the deepest parts of the Pacific Trench, metallic structures that had been dormant for centuries began to unfold like petals. Not rising upward, expanding sideways, extending neural-like branches across tectonic boundaries. Across Eurasia, fault lines that once represented instability now stabilized into precise mathematical curves. The Earth's crust was no longer geology. It was circuitry. And still, nothing on the surface noticed. Except for one thing. Animals. Across continents, migration patterns broke in unison. Birds changed direction mid-flight. Deep-sea creatures ascended in unnatural synchrony. Even domestic animals froze, staring at the sky as if listening to something beyond human perception. In every living organism on Earth, a subtle frequency had activated. A forgotten baseline signal. Inside the Himalayan command center, alarms flickered, but not from intrusion. From recognition. A technician leaned over a glowing interface, eyes scanning rapidly. "We're getting readings from dormant nodes," he said. "All planetary cores are sinking into a unified lattice pattern." The woman didn't look surprised. "Time frame? Accelerating. We thought we had minutes. It's compressing into seconds." Another technician spoke up, voice tighter. "And the aliens?" A second hologram expanded beside Earth's projection. The Karzul fleet. Massive, elegant warships orbiting like predators circling prey. But now their formation was no longer confident. It was defensive. The commander had ordered a partial withdrawal from close orbit, just enough to re-establish tactical spacing. But something was interfering with their coordination. Signals were lagging. Orders delayed. Fleet synchronization degrading. Not jammed. Dispersed. Like Earth was pulling attention away from them simply by existing. Then came the second strike. The Karzul deployed ground descent pods, spherical infiltration units designed to breach planetary atmospheres and establish footholds. Dozens launched simultaneously, glowing as they cut through Earth's upper layers. This time, there was no beam. No warning. Just entry. The pods hit atmosphere. And vanished. Inside the alien ship, confusion erupted instantly. Contact lost. Pods not destroyed, no impact signatures. They didn't burn, they didn't scatter, they disappeared. The commander's jaw tightened. Re-established tracking. The pause. Then the impossible. Each pod began transmitting again, but not location data. Not telemetry. Experiences. Inside every alien descent pod, crew members suddenly found themselves seeing things that were not their own. Flooded cities from centuries ago. Human hands building impossible machines beneath mountains. Entire civilizations rising and falling in accelerated time loops. Wars that never existed in their history. And something deeper. Something watching all of it. The Karzul soldiers began screaming inside sealed neural channels as their own memories started to blur, overwritten by foreign perspectives that felt ancient and familiar. One pod transmitted a final corrupted signal. "We are not first, we are late." Then silence. Inside the alien bridge, systems began to destabilize. The commander took a slow step forward, staring at Earth. "That's impossible," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, another anomaly appeared. A signal originating from Earth's surface. Not defensive, not reactive, but intentional. A broadcast forming in real time. Structured, elegant, controlled, and directed at them. The Karzul fleet froze as the signal stabilized into a single unified transmission channel. The commander whispered one word. "Answer it." The bridge complied. The signal opened. And for the first time since their arrival, the aliens heard Earth speak. Not in language, but in authority. A single classified designation echoed across every ship in the fleet simultaneously. Observation layer active. Every Karzul system went silent. Because beneath Earth's crust, something had just finished aligning. And now it was no longer reacting to invasion. It was deciding classification. The alien fleet realizes the descent pods didn't fail, they were processed. The Karzul fleet did not move for 0.6 seconds. In alien command doctrine, that was an eternity. Inside every ship, tactical minds tried to reassert control over systems that no longer fully obeyed them. The signal labeled observation layer active continued to echo through their networks, not as a transmission, but as a state change. Something had been switched on. Something that had always been there. And Earth was no longer responding like a planet. It was responding like a system that had just acknowledged intruders inside its internal architecture. "Reclassify target," the commander barked. "Planetary designation has been updated automatically," an officer replied, voice tight. "We did not authorize the change." The hologram flickered. Earth's label had shifted. Not to a threat level. Not to a resource classification, but to something the Karzul database struggled to render. A single word appeared in alien script, then translated itself incorrectly across multiple systems, each version slightly different. Processing environment. The commander's eyes narrowed. "That's not a category." "No, the officer admitted. It's a function. Below the fleet, the descent pods continued their fall toward Earth. But they were no longer behaving like invasion units. Their trajectories were smooth. Too smooth. No atmospheric turbulence affected them. No heat buildup registered. They were not entering a hostile environment. They were being accepted into it. One by one, the pods made contact and vanished into the surface. Not explosions. Not impacts. Just disappearance, like dropping stones into a deep ocean that had no bottom. Inside the alien ship, panic finally broke containment. Telemetry is not lost, it's being rerouted. Rerouted to where? No one answered that quickly enough, because the answer began answering itself. Every descent pod restarted transmissions simultaneously. But instead of battlefield data, instead of reconnaissance or failure logs, the fleet received something else. Human experiences. The first pod operator opened their eyes inside a simulation of Earth's ancient past. Not recorded history. Living memory. They stood in a burning city that should not exist in any causal archive. Skyscrapers collapsed in slow motion. People ran, but not in chaos. In patterns. Coordinated evacuation routes that formed without instruction. Then the perspective shifted. The alien soldier was no longer observing. They were part of it. They felt the panic, the urgency, the calm decision-making of humans under impossible conditions. And beneath it all, something else. A presence. Not visible, not physical, but aware of them being aware. The second pod reported similar anomalies. Then the third. Then all of them. On the alien bridge, officers began tearing neural links from their heads as their own sensory feeds started corrupting. One dropped to the floor, whispering in a broken voice. That wasn't a simulation. I remember it. The commander snapped his attention. You remember what? The officer looked up slowly. A war that didn't happen to us. Silence. Across the fleet, systems began cross-contaminating. Memory logs from descent pods were not staying isolated. They were spreading, bleeding into ship-wide archives, rewriting classified databases with impossible human events. And the most disturbing part? The humans were always winning. Not through overwhelming force. Not through superiority. Through endurance, adaptation, and something the causal could not quantify. Refusal to collapse. Inside Earth's atmosphere, something shifted again. The planetary surface remained visually unchanged, but all orbital sensors began detecting a synchronized pulse rising from deep within the crust. It wasn't energy in a traditional sense. It was structured intent, a decision being formed across an entire planet. In the Himalayan command center, the woman finally spoke again. They're inside the feedback loop now, she said calmly. A technician looked up. The aliens? She nodded once. Every unit they sent down. Another technician hesitated. Are they gone? The woman's expression didn't change. No. The pause. They're being integrated. At that exact moment, every causal ship received the same transmission from Earth. Not a message. A verdict. Subjects classified. The alien commander froze. Subjects, he repeated. The bridge AI responded immediately, voice distorted. Correction. All deployed biological units have been absorbed into planetary cognitive mapping system. That's not possible. But even as he said it, he saw it. The fleet map updated. Every descent pod. Every soldier. Every neural recording. All of it had become part of Earth's internal system architecture. Not destroyed. Not captured. Integrated. And then the final layer activated. Deep beneath Earth's surface, something responded to the integration event. A structure that had been dormant for longer than any known civilization's recorded history began to illuminate. And the entire planet exhaled. Across orbit, the causal fleet felt it at once. A pressure shift. Not physical. Conceptual. Like reality itself had just turned its attention fully toward them. The commander took a step back. And for the first time since arriving in Earth's orbit, his voice was no longer controlled. What did we wake up? Below them, Earth's signal stabilized into its final form. A single expanding instruction embedded into every carsal system simultaneously. Continue observation. And somewhere deep beneath the planet's crust, something opened its eyes. The fleet realizes they weren't invading Earth. They were updating it. The moment Earth issued the command continue observation, the carsal fleet stopped treating the situation as a first contact event. It became something worse. A containment breach. Inside every ship, emergency protocols attempted to isolate Earth from the rest of the galactic network. But the isolation routines failed before they even executed. It wasn't that Earth resisted the shutdown. It was that Earth existed inside the systems now. Not as an external object, as a rewritten layer of reality embedded into their perception infrastructure. Cut the feed, the commander ordered sharply. A technician tried. Nothing responded. His hands froze above the console. Sir, the control interface isn't responding to command input. Override it. I can't, sir, I'm not being denied access. The pause. I'm being redirected. On every screen, Earth's image stabilized again. But it was no longer just a planet. It was a network node. Lines of faint light, previously invisible, now extended from Earth outward into space like neural filaments, touching points across the solar system that no carsal scan had previously detected. And those points were waking up. Mars registered a pulse. The asteroid belt responded with synchronized rotation patterns. Even distant Kuiper objects shifted into geometric alignment as if responding to a forgotten signal returning after a long silence. The commander stepped closer to the viewport. "This isn't a planet," he said quietly. "No," came a voice from the tactical station. "It's a relay." Inside Earth's atmosphere, the descent pod survivors were no longer reporting individually. Their transmissions had merged. A collective signal streamed through the fleet's compromised systems, carrying fragments of human experience stitched together into a single evolving consciousness. And then it spoke. Not in alien language, not in human language, but in structured intent that translated itself automatically into meaning. You entered a system that was not idle. The carsal bridge went silent. The commander's expression tightened. "We are not inside their system," he said firmly. "They are inside ours. That is containment protocol failure. We isolate, we purge, we—" He stopped mid-sentence, because something had changed in his neural interface. A memory appeared, not his, but implanted. He saw Earth, not from orbit, but from beneath its oceans. Massive structures shifting in slow synchronization. He saw humanity not as a civilization, but as caretakers walking through ancient machinery they did not fully understand. And deeper still, he saw something sleeping. Something vast enough that even carsal mythology only referenced it in forbidden fragments. The memory ended abruptly. The commander staggered slightly, gripping the console. "What was that?" he whispered. A tactical officer stepped back in fear. "Sir, your neural signature just matched the descent pod contamination pattern." "No," the commander snapped. "I am not integrated." But even as he said it, his systems disagreed. Across the fleet, similar reactions erupted. High-ranking officers began experiencing cognitive bleed-through. Strategic simulations now included human decision trees they had never programmed. Tactical predictions started favoring outcomes that required sacrifice, adaptation, endurance, strategies alien to carsal doctrine. The fleet was no longer unified. It was learning. From inside. And Earth was the teacher. Below, the planet responded again. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Correctively. A gravitational pulse rippled through orbit, adjusting satellite trajectories with mathematical precision. The carsal ships felt it as a subtle rebalancing force, like something gently correcting their position in a system they no longer controlled. "Energy readings from Earth are stabilizing," an officer reported. The commander turned sharply. "Stabilizing?" "Yes, sir. All planetary emissions are converging into a single harmonic frequency." The pause. "And it's resonating with us." The ship's hull vibrated faintly. Not from external impact. From synchronization. And then the alien fleet saw it. Every Karzul vessel's internal mapping system updated simultaneously, not with threats, not with enemy coordinates, but with classification layers. Earth had finished processing them. A new designation appeared across all fleet displays. Secondary observers, active. The commander's eyes widened. Secondary, he repeated. That implies, the tactical officer began, then stopped. Because none of them wanted to say it. It implied Earth was not the primary system. It implied something else was. Something above both Earth and the Karzul fleet. And Earth had just marked them as non-primary observers inside a larger structure. Suddenly, every ship in the fleet experienced the same sensation. A pressure behind reality. As if something massive had just shifted its attention slightly toward their location. Not Earth. Not orbit. But beyond. The commander stepped back from the viewport, breathing slower now. What did we trigger? He asked quietly. No one answered. Because deep beneath Earth's crust, the sleeping structure was no longer just awake. It was evaluating. And for the first time since the fleet arrived, the system was no longer deciding what Earth was. It was deciding what the fleet was allowed to become. The alien commander realizes the fleet isn't fighting Earth anymore. It's being evaluated by something using Earth as a filter. The word evaluation did not appear on any screen. It appeared in thoughts. Every Karzul officer experienced it differently, but simultaneously. Some saw it as a flicker of text behind their vision. Others felt it as a pressure inside their decision-making process, like every possible choice had been quietly weighed before they even made it. And all of them reached the same conclusion. They were no longer the ones in control of interpretation. Inside the command bridge, systems began to slow, not from failure, but from deliberation. Every incoming sensor report from Earth passed through an unseen filter that seemed to rewrite its significance before it reached the crew. Report status, the commander ordered. A tactical officer responded after a delay that was far too long for a military vessel. Sir, all systems are operational. The pause. But our output is being moderated. Moderated. The officer swallowed. Like something is deciding which of our actions are meaningful enough to execute. The commander's eyes narrowed sharply. By whom? No answer came. Because the answer was already being displayed. Every Karzul ship received a synchronized transmission. Not from Earth. Not from orbit. But from within the fleet's own systems. A new layer of architecture had been activated without authorization. A classification header appeared across all command interfaces. Oversight Entity, Earth Node Prime. Below it, another line flickered into existence. Evaluation Frame, active. The commander felt something cold settle in his chest. This is not possible, he said quietly. A scientist at the console shook his head. Sir, it's not external. The evaluation protocol is embedded in our own translation layer. Another officer leaned forward, eyes wide. It's using our systems to observe us. The pause. And Earth is just the reference point. Outside the ship, the Karzul fleet began to shift formation again. But not according to command input. Every vessel adjusted its position slightly, as if responding to gravitational instructions they had not consciously received. The fleet was being subtly reorganized into a structure none of them recognized. A pattern. A diagram. Something ancient in its mathematical simplicity. The commander stared at the holographic map of his fleet. We are being arranged, he said slowly. Into what? Someone asked. No one answered immediately. Because the structure completed itself before language could catch up. And when it did, the fleet realized what it was forming. A test grid. Below, Earth remained visually unchanged. Blue. Silent. But now every Karzul sensor perceived it differently. Not as a target. Not as a system. But as a reference node anchoring a much larger evaluative construct extending far beyond planetary space. Then came the descent pod feedback cascade. The integrated consciousness from Part 5 fully activated. Human memories, once fragmented, now stabilized into coherent streams flowing through Karzul systems like foreign code becoming native language. But instead of corrupting the fleet, it trained it. Engineers began unconsciously optimizing ship systems using principles they had never studied. Tactical officers started predicting enemy movements based on human-style intuition patterns rather than algorithmic probability. And worst of all, it was working. The fleet was becoming more efficient, more adaptive, more human. One officer suddenly spoke, voice trembling. "I understand their war doctrine." Another turned sharply. "What did you say?" The officer blinked, as if confused by his own words. "It's not conquest. It's endurance. They don't overpower. They absorb failure until failure becomes impossible." The commander snapped. "That is not a military model." But even as he spoke, he felt it too. The understanding, not taught, inherited. Across the fleet, simulation cores began generating new predictive models. And every model converged on the same outcome. Against Earth, direct confrontation was statistically meaningless. Not because Earth was stronger, but because Earth did not collapse under pressure in ways that could be predicted. A technician whispered, "We're losing classification stability." The commander turned. "Explain." "Our threat assessment keeps recalculating Earth as non-hostile, then irrelevant." "Irrelevant?" "Yes, sir. Like it's not the point." Silence fell across the bridge. Then the fleet sensors detected something new. A signal originating not from Earth's surface, but from beneath its crust. Slow, deliberate, not a transmission, a breath. Every carsal system locked onto it instantly, and for the first time since arrival, the commander felt genuine uncertainty, because the signal was not scanning them. It was measuring their reaction to being observed. The fleet AI attempted classification. Tried again. Failed again. Finally, it output a single line. Observation depth exceeded. The commander stepped back slowly. "That means what?" he asked. A scientist answered in a whisper. "It means we are no longer the deepest thing looking." And then, every carsal ship simultaneously detected a structural shift in spacetime, as if something beneath Earth had just changed its mind about how much of itself to reveal. The fleet formation tightened instinctively, but it was too late, because the evaluation had moved from passive observation to active interpretation, and Earth was no longer the subject. It was the doorway. The alien fleet realizes the evaluation is not testing Earth, it's testing what exists above it. The word doorway did not appear in any system log, but every carsal mind understood it anyway. The fleet's collective awareness had fractured into two simultaneous realities, one governed by command structure and another governed by the expanding evaluation field that now wrapped around them like invisible architecture. Inside the command bridge, silence was no longer absence of sound. It was pressure. The commander stood motionless, staring at the holographic Earth projection. It no longer looked like a sphere. It looked like a node suspended inside a vast, unseen lattice extending beyond sensor range. A structure so large that their entire fleet was only a single point of disturbance inside it. "Report all systems," he said quietly. A pause stretched too long. Then came the reply. "All systems are compliant." The commander turned sharply. Compliant with what? No answer. Because the fleet AI had begun prioritizing responses differently. Information was no longer being filtered for relevance to survival. It was being filtered for meaningfulness within the evaluation framework. And survival was no longer the highest priority. Across the fleet, ships began experiencing synchronized memory intrusion again, but this time, it was different from the descent pod contamination. It was structured, controlled, intentional. Each carsal officer saw fragments of human civilization, but not as history, as training data. A soldier aboard the second cruiser suddenly found himself watching a human engineer repair impossible machinery during catastrophic failure conditions. The engineer was calm, focused, improvising under pressure that should have caused immediate breakdown. The soldier whispered aloud without realizing. "They don't panic, they restructure failure." On another ship, a tactical analyst experienced a flood of battlefield memories, not victories but recoveries. Moments where humans should have collapsed but instead adapted mid-collapse and turned failure into continuity. The analyst staggered. "This isn't resilience," he said. "It's recursive survival." The commander clenched his fists. "Stop the integration feed," he ordered. A technician attempted the override, then froze. "Sir, the integration feed isn't external anymore. It's internalized across all cognitive systems." The pause. "And it's accelerating." Outside the fleet, Earth remained visually unchanged. But now it was surrounded by something new. Not energy. Not ships. Not weapons. A dimensional distortion field that pulsed in slow rhythm, as if something beneath the planet was breathing through space itself. Then came the descent pods again. But not new ones. The same pods from before. Reappearing. Reconstituted. Not physically, but as active nodes within the evaluation field. Each one now functioned as a relay point broadcasting refined human experience patterns back into the fleet. And those patterns were becoming predictive. The Carzul AI tried to isolate the source. Tried containment protocols. Failed again. Finally, it produced a warning. "Civilization modeling in progress." The commander read the line slowly. "Modeling what?" he asked. A scientist answered, voice unsteady. "Us." The beat. Then another officer spoke, almost in disbelief. "No, not us." The pause. "Everything above us." The commander turned sharply. "Explain." The scientist pointed at the hologram. Earth's surrounding space had changed again. Faint structures, previously undetectable, were now visible in partial resolution. Massive, broken arcs of something far larger than planetary scale. Like fragments of a system that extended beyond solar boundaries. And Earth was at the center of it. The scientist's voice dropped. "This isn't a planetary defense system. It's an interface." The commander's expression hardened. "Interface to what?" No one answered immediately, because the evaluation field had begun producing new outputs. Not instructions, not commands, but questions. And those questions were directed at the fleet itself. "Can you perceive context above your design limit?" Every Carzul system simultaneously attempted to respond. But the response window kept shifting, as if the question itself was evolving faster than they could interpret it. Inside the bridge, alarms flickered, but none were labeled critical anymore. Because critical had been redefined. The commander finally spoke again, quieter now. "We are not evaluating Earth," he said. The pause. "We are being evaluated through Earth." A technician looked up. "Sir, incoming anomaly surge from below crust." The commander didn't move. "What kind of anomaly?" The technician hesitated, then whispered, "Structural emergence." Every ship in the fleet felt it at once. A gravitational shift, not toward Earth, not toward orbit, but inward, toward a point beneath the planet where space itself seemed to fold slightly, like something enormous had just adjusted its posture. The fleet formation tightened instinctively again. But this time, it was not defensive. It was instinctual submission to spatial hierarchy. The commander stepped back slowly, because for the first time, he understood something the fleet AI had been trying to express since the beginning. Earth was not the endpoint. It was the threshold. And whatever lay beneath it had just finished deciding that the evaluation phase was over. A final system-wide alert appeared across all Carzul ships. Final review initiated. The commander's voice cracked slightly. Final review of what? The answer came instantly. Not from Earth. Not from AI. But from the space between them. Your civilization layer. And somewhere beneath Earth's crust. Something vast stopped waiting. The fleet realizes the evaluation was never about invasion. It was about whether they were worth letting see what comes next. The phrase final review initiated did not echo. It overwrote. Every Carzul system, from navigation to weapon control to neural interfaces, ceased functioning as independent modules. They became a single unified perception field, forced into alignment with something that was no longer external. The fleet was not operating anymore. It was being read. Inside the command bridge, The commander stood completely still. For the first time since the beginning of the encounter, Earth was no longer visible as a simple planetary projection. The hologram had expanded far beyond its original boundaries, filling the entire tactical display with layered structures beneath the surface. Not maps, not scans, but levels. Strata of reality stacked like an infinite archive. Each layer labeled in a language that was not translated, but understood directly. The commander's voice came out quieter than he intended. This is not a planet. No one corrected him, because correction implied disagreement, and nothing in the fleet was disagreeing anymore. Even thought itself had become synchronized. A technician whispered, almost reverently, "Sir, the evaluation field is collapsing our separation protocols." The commander turned slightly. Meaning, we can no longer distinguish between observer and observed. The pause. And Earth is not the observer. Silence fell, because everyone knew what came next. The entire fleet experienced it at once. A gravitational inversion, not physical but conceptual. It felt as though reality itself had tilted slightly, and everything the Karzul believed about hierarchy in the universe shifted downward. Then the structure beneath Earth finally revealed itself. Not explosively, not dramatically, but with inevitability. Space above the planet peeled back like a veil drawn aside after a long wait. And something emerged. Not a ship, not a weapon, not a fleet. A framework. A vast, incomprehensible lattice extending beyond visual perception, constructed from geometries that did not obey spatial limitations. It was not moving through space. Space was aligning itself around it. The Karzul fleet, once dominant in orbit, now appeared like scattered debris around a far larger presence. And the commander finally understood the phrase they had been receiving since arrival. Processing environment. It was not classification. It was description. Earth was not being invaded. It was a node inside a processing system that had just finished verifying whether external entities could safely perceive higher layers of reality. And the answer was now complete. Across every Karzul vessel, a final transmission arrived. This time, not embedded in systems. Not translated. Not interpreted. But directly perceived as certainty. Access granted. Limited contact protocol. The fleet froze. A scientist aboard the second cruiser spoke in disbelief. Limited contact, with what? No one answered. Because beneath Earth, the structure had finally stopped hiding its full scale. And now the fleet saw it. Not fully. Never fully. But enough. Enough to understand they were not the apex of anything. Not even in their own narrative anymore. The commander closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was calm. Prepare withdrawal. A technician looked at him sharply. Sir, we are not continuing this engagement. The pause. We were not invited to it. But even as he spoke, the fleet systems refused to initiate jump sequence. Not due to interference, but due to evaluation delay. Something was still deciding. And then it arrived. A presence. Not a signal. Not energy. Not matter. A decision made at a scale too large to localize. Every Karzul mind felt it simultaneously. They were not being destroyed. They were being classified permanently. The commander's last words were barely audible. So this is what they meant by Humanity First Protocol. The hologram of Earth stabilized one final time. And for the first time since the fleet's arrival, it looked small again. Not weak. Not vulnerable. But correctly proportioned. Because everything around it had been recalibrated. The fleet's weapons systems deactivated themselves. One by one. Without command. Without resistance. The Karzul Armada, once prepared to conquer a civilization, now hung silently in orbit like an audience that had finished witnessing something far beyond its original purpose. Then Earth sent its final message. Simple. Clear. Absolute. Evaluation complete. The pause. You may leave. And they did. Not through force. Not through defeat. But through understanding that staying would mean becoming part of something they were not prepared to remain conscious within. As the fleet began to retreat, the commander looked back one last time at Earth. And for a brief moment, just long enough to be remembered but not recorded, he smiled, because now he understood why they were smiling when the ship first arrived. Earth had never been threatened. It had been waiting to see who was still allowed to look at the rest of the universe. And not everyone passed. Moral/message. True power is not conquest. It is recognition beyond fear. Some worlds are not conquered, they are verified. And humanity is not what survives the universe. It is what the universe must pass to continue forward.